Okay, well, first, hello everybody. Great to have you in today's session, our monthly DueDash Ask Me Anything about growth hacking. We're very excited to have two wonderful experts here, which I will introduce shortly, and we are also be able to ask your questions to them, and we can go through and have a great discussion. But before we do that, I would like to give you some short introductory words of who we are, just to understand, okay, what is this all about? So when we start with DueDash, the question is, what is the biggest challenge for most of you as a startup? What is a big issue? And usually we see it's the fact of access to capital and investors. And less than 1% of startups are ever able to raise any funding during their existence. And that is the purpose of why DueDash exists. And that's why we started this focused community to really help you get to the point of investability in the first place and receive funding. So currently with what we have as DueDash as a community platform, which is the first step in what we're building, we're enabling to exchange with our founders, investors, experts to first understand the process of fundraising and then go through that process. So what does DueDash currently can enable you as a founder? With our current community, of course, we can help you exchange, find relevant contacts and networks from experts to co-founders. You're able to learn your knowledge, such as in a session like this. You join such events either locally or globally. We can help you to validate your business ideas, find first customers. But we can also help you on the investment side. That's, as I said, understanding your investability. We offer a free investment readiness check at the moment. You can get credit as a startup, free startup credits of up to $25,000 depending on the stage or where you are. But we also have further services such as that's a paid service, really getting you to the point of exchanging with an investor. So we can actually help you creating outreach material and do one-on-one introductions, help you for due diligence. And also we support virtual acceleration incubation programs and also people who want to build their own community inside a larger startup ecosystem. Just to show you some quick stuff, the DueDash Investment Readiness Check, which I would suggest all of you to go through to. And this investment readiness check, it's where we check all the different aspects of your business, from finance to team to your pitch deck, to see, are you ready for investors or not? Because usually you have one shot with an investor, and if you miss it, you don't know if he will give you a second time. So that's why we really want to check first of you, where are you? And if you're ready, we're happy to forward you to our investor lounge to get in touch with investors. Then, of course, we have our founder sparring rings. These are local communities all around the world to help you exchange with people in your city. If you want to build a business in, let's say, Bangalore, if you want to build in Cologne or somewhere else, you want to meet the right people, exchange with them, and get the support you need. And for that, we have dedicated city leaders that help you in that process. So that was just a quick intro on DueDash before the session. If you have more questions, we're always happy to take them up. You can write me on DueDash itself or just through my email, and we're happy to answer them. But now let's go to our speakers. That's what you've been waiting for and you're excited to learn about. So first, let's start with Felix Wong. Felix Wong is the growth lead in APAC for Angel Hub and WeHub. He has been an experienced community manager and builder also for Techstars. He facilitated many programs, gatherings, hackathons, events, startup events as part of these communities. He has founded companies himself and also exited them. And also he is always passionate about growth and developing. And we're happy to hear more from Felix, the growth advocate. Also, we have with us Cyrus Santoshi. He has been a writer, speaker, and also senior program manager at HackerEarth. It's a global community of over 4.5 million developers globally. And he has been very passionate about building products, creating, working with developers. So I think with these two here, we will see from both sides when it comes to growth and traction, how can you hack, let's call it your community growth, but how can you also track your product development growth? And with that, I think I will start giving a question to you guys. Our term, like what you're going to have as a session today, is growth hacking to gain traction. Maybe start with you, Felix. What would you say to gain traction, let's say with community building, building a community? What would you say would be your advice to any startup or founder to start with if they're still in the beginning process?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for bringing this up. I think first of all, speaking of tractions, there's so many definitions out there, and I believe communities can play a major role to help startups, founders, access to first of all the fundamental resource of a community, which is people. And community works because communities is a predefined network of how we gather like-minded individuals, like-minded resources, and different stakeholders within the ecosystem. And to participate at communities will help you get access to these resources faster. In my experience in the past, when I first started my own company, I was actually benefits a lot from the community efforts, access mentors, getting early customers, getting potential investments, or even big enterprise to endorse our services. So I think all these connections can actually contribute your attractions, sales, subscriptions, having people involved in your
Mhm.
business, the whole life cycle and all that. But I think at the end of the day, your mission as a founder is really find a way to measure your success. How do you see tractions? Because there's no golden rules of many different companies. You should have your own definition of measuring the success.
It's a good point, like you mentioned, when starting with like traction, using kind of like networks, using people and building something. What I noticed with many founders or people also in general is the issue we don't know how to start with building, like that community or that networking. Like many people say, okay, I can talk with people, I have some friends, but how do I become a proper networker? And maybe even the step further, some people are good networkers, but are not able to build this into a community to really grow and scale. It becomes like a one-on-one thing.
I have a strong connection to this point you mentioned just now. I remember when I first graduated, even before actually when I was still in university, I rarely speak because my academic background doesn't require any communications. I was a mathematical major, no group work, no presentation, 3 years, just attend courses, submit my assignments, take the exam, and then I graduate. And eventually I work as a data scientist for tech companies. But until I got invited by a friend to participate in my very first hackathon, that's how I get started to communicate with people, exchange context, and talk about business, talk about how we solve problems. And I think all these incidents is really based on the effort of community builders who initiated community events, hackathons, and different initiatives to attract people to participate in the community in different capacity. And that's actually unlock and myself to speak up more, to network, to connect more people. I learned so much throughout these 7 years entrepreneur journeys. I can't imagine if I decided to get rid of the hackathon, I won't be here.
Maybe coming, that's a good point. Like as you mentioned, hackathon. That's some maybe to you, Cherish, on that point. You have a lot of experience talking about hackathon developing. How would you say can such structured events or programs help you, like growth hack your own growth? Like make does it make sense to join these hackathons to get your stuff to the next level, or what would you suggest here?
Right. So thanks, Felix, for bringing that up. I think just your story is so inspiring that a lot of people in the community actually, started their entrepreneurial journey from a hackathon itself. So I manage hackathons day in, day out, right? That's my bread and butter. I've managed 100 plus, 150 plus hackathons so far. So straight out of that, hackathons can be categorized in three objectives. The first is that you're crowdsourcing solutions. As a business, you have a problem to solve, or you're trying to build a product roadmap, and you put out a business problem out to the community and say, "Hey, why don't you build upon this?" Right? And whatever you get out of it, you take it back to your Kanban board, to your Agile. You break it down, and then you further build on it. That's the first objective. The second objective is you're trying to get your product or API adoptions. Now, you might have built something very cool, like an API, for instance, like a payment gateway, right? But first of all, for you to get more traction, and in fact, this brings us to the growth aspect of things. You want people to adopt your product, your APIs, and then build certain use cases for it, so that you can take it and further sell it to your customers, right? Now that's the second objective where you've made a product and you're pretty certain about how you want to pitch it. And now you have people actually building upon it and adopting it in winter. Now, the third objective of a hackathon is talent pipeline or branding. Now, a lot of great companies like Goldman Sachs or like JP Morgan, these are great fintech companies, but not necessarily positioned in a tech company like Google or Amazon or Apple, right? So they lose out on a lot of great tech talent because not the first choice from a developer perspective. So hackathon itself, right? Doing a hackathon kind of brands them as a tech company, right? Now, I want to touch base on the second objective where you said that what happens, how hackathons can help in growth traction. So it's important, right? Like it's like right now in this year, I managed a few hackathons for Microsoft Azure. Azure is a fairly new cloud infrastructure when we compare to AWS, right? And they're trying to grow Azure. Now, how do you do it? First, you obviously have a sales team that is going out, but like Felix mentioned, and very rightly so, doing it via communities has a massive and long-term advantage, because you're not spending your advertising dollar for one pitch. You're spending your dollars to create an ecosystem that is self-sustaining, that will continue to talk to each other, help each other, and then grow whether or with minimal requirement and maintenance, right? So I managed these adoption hackathons for Microsoft Azure, and we've already impacted 10,000 plus developers in one hackathon, and 15,000 is what we're targeting for a series of 3 hackathons that is concluding in 15 days, right? And for the next year, I think we have a target of maybe Microsoft has a target of adopting 100,000 developers for Microsoft Learn module using the power of communities. And that's why a lot of people are investing in communities so far.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think what's interesting here, when we talk about, you mentioned like a self-sustaining ecosystem. I think everybody's talking these days about platforms, moving to platforms. I want to build like the next Amazon, Google, or whatever. And I would be curious into asking you, like now that people slowly understand the idea of building a self-sustaining ecosystem for growth instead of like strategies that are just selling into your face and then be done with it. What do people usually do wrong with that? When you notice, like if it's from the community aspect or development, when we talk about a self-sustaining community for growth, for attraction, what do people don't get about that still? Maybe for you, like, yeah, sure.
Sorry, Felix, you
No, sure, you can add that on Felix if like you want to add some thoughts.
After you.
All right, thanks, Felix. Mike rightly pointed, and that's a fantastic point. You've kind of questioned the sense of what goes wrong when we talk about communities. I think in my humble experiences, when a lot of people come up to me and say, "Hey, why don't you mentor us in growing a community?" I think they lack the vision of why they want a community. They feel that it's a cheaper way to get the buzz done, or sometimes it's kind of backed with the branding of the company or self-branding per se. If now understand, the community is not about you; it is about them, which means that as a developer, I will always have more options than you will. If I'm sitting here at my home, I have options to join communities for Amazon, Facebook, Google, Hacker, Atlassian, Cloud, Salesforce, tons of them, right? Now, what sets you apart? Why must I join you, and how can you not fail? I think it all comes back, to one point, that is impact and value. What impact are you creating, and what tangible value can you provide continuously to the developer or your community in return, so that for them it makes sense for them to come back to you over and over again, right? Otherwise, you're just another player in the market fighting for developer mind share when you don't have any unique or any tangible benefit to offer.
Do you add anything to that, Felix?
Yeah, I would definitely echo that, and I think I will construct the community mindset into 2 angles. First of all, like short term, like there's a couple of things in common from different communities, and I think people usually felt at early stage because they think about the scalability too early. And I believe having a successful community is not about how many people you have, it's because it's really measuring the quality of people, the quality of content, and the quality of impacts you're creating. If you manage to pull up 2 of your friends to start a book club, it's a community. 3 people, it's a community. All you need to do is try to make sure, even though you are at a small size group, you manage to have a sustainable content, keep people updated, exchange contacts, helping each other, and eventually figure out whether you have more other common topics where you can scale to other people around these second degree connections. And that's the moment you need to think about scalability. And in long run, what community usually, what the challenges usually face is afraid to pass the baton. I had the same experience in the past where community managers, community builders are not exactly a job, although some companies, they look for people who are in these disciplines. But to be honest, to have a successful community, you always need to identify new community builders, new facilitators. Otherwise, the community will always be under your umbrella. You can't really bring in new bloods, you can't really bring in new insights and new connections. So that's why one of the success metrics of measuring a community builder is how fast these community builders can scale up themselves, identify new people, and eventually find someone to do their job.
Is that also, like, when you talk about growth in general, maybe for both of you, do you think that's something that's also difficult? Like if you are the person responsible for growth for your team and then it goes to the next person, is that also a challenge sometimes? Like,
yeah, always. I would say the upside is a good challenge because you realize this is something you need to pay attention and put your resources. I read a very interesting thread a couple days ago on LinkedIn. It's not about community, but I learned a lot from this thread how we can apply into community. And in short, what the post described is basically there was a scenario where someone need to stay away from the company for a couple months because his wife is currently at the maternity leave and so on and so forth, where the person need to prioritize more efforts towards families, other personal issues to make sure himself and also his family is also okay. But when he get back to the company, before he went back to the company, he was kind of worrying his responsibilities and position will be deprioritized or being taken by someone else. But the thing is totally opposite. He got erased by the company. Why? Because while the time he got away from the company, all his reports and middle management managed to sustain the operations. And this shows his leaderships. Even though the person is not within the company, people still manage to kill all the KPIs, work, and eventually deliver results. And that's why this is how we see where we can replicate into community as well. It's not really just about the community builder, but also how you influence people to do the same thing, how you can encourage more people to speak up and take over what you can do in the past.
Okay. And I would be curious to know, when we talk about, like the long-term impact, maybe for you, Cherish, what do you say are, let's say, the KPIs one should focus on when we talk about growth hacking for traction? What should people look at when we're building that in the company?
All right. So I think it would certainly depend upon what is it that you're trying to grow. Is it like a community, or is it like a product, or is it an API? Everybody would have different KPIs here, but at the end of the day, I kind of want to touch base that KPIs is a very while KPIs they're very objective to define and very easy to measure. Sometimes the KPIs are very hard to like it's more nuanced than just like a number game. Like Felix said, right? It's not about how many people you have. It's about what impact and how long they stay together for. Now, considering you have a community and your KPI basically is not necessarily about how many people you add, but also about how much engagement do you get. So think about it in this way. Let me give you a very crude example, right? And this will kind of give you a way to look at engagement or look at KPIs in a very radical or very unconventional way. We all are member of one or two WhatsApp groups with our friends, which keeps on buzzing with one or two messages, right? And we know right? And we know that it's a community with our friends, and we know the minute we see some kind of content, we know, oh, my group will enjoy this. Let me send it there, right? And a lot of people respond to it. So which means that there is that group kind of identifies itself and has set what it stands for, what kind of content will we respect and appreciate here, what is something that doesn't interest us. Now, while that way may not grow, while that the number of people in that group may not grow, while the number of comments that you get on one picture may not grow, but it's still a very self-sustaining, impactful society, right? So the KPIs are easy to define, easy to measure. But at the same time, I like some of the KPIs you could think is how many people you have, what is the traction that you're getting per post, how your platform is performing. In community, you'll have a lot of strategies. I've laid out strategies for a few communities. So your strategies would revolve around platform strategy, content strategy, brand strategy, your audience strategy. You'll break your audience and demographics, whom to reach out to and how. You'll create personas around them also, and then you'll have assigned acquisition KPIs, retention KPIs, D60, D30. What is the engagement that you're doing? But at the same time, these are fairly numerical things that can calculate. But I really want to stress upon this fact, and I can't stress enough that while you're chasing an objective mathematical KPI, do not forget that at the end of the day, community kind of flourishes on what value are you adding and what impact has your contribution actually created. Measure that impact. Like Google, for instance, uh, they are very, they create success stories out of their communities, and measuring that is not about just number game, but also about that there was a person who was, maybe failed primary school, but today is running a startup with no formal education, right? And just that's just one person, right? So it doesn't count in a mathematical sense, but the impact that it has created in the community or in the society is immense. So calculate more nuanced KPIs as well, along with the objective ones that I just mentioned.
Like with different trying to see it. Also, for you guys, like I'm already starting to answer like audience questions. The last one was actually from the audience, so just keep it in, ask more questions, and we continue on. Maybe going from the KPIs to, let's call it like growth potential. Maybe for you, Felix. Angelina asked, like, in which area of business would you see the biggest potential for growth hacking at the moment? Because you've seen so many different businesses and areas.
I wish I have a golden answer. But I think right now there are a couple of trends moving on where because of the pandemic, people are forced to being more digitalized than before. It speeds up a lot of industries where they don't have the love from industries such as online learning, such as contactless technologies, e-commerce. In my regions, just to pick Hong Kong as an example, e-commerce been exist for a decade. Amazon and all these Walmart, all these companies are pioneering, but there's never a behavior where people are actively purchasing online in small neighborhood because it's just so easy to buy things. Everything's in on the street and you can get 24 hours malls in convenience store easily. But now because people are forced to stay indoor, they still want to enjoy the idea of buying things and enjoy the purchase behaviors, and it speeds up a lot on behalf of e-commerce, logistics, and the whole supply chain.
Do you saw some interesting like examples of let's say growth hacks this year at Singles Day? Like for those who don't know, like we had like the big Singles Day like in China, so there's a lot of sales happening. And did you see some interesting examples like on the Chinese Hong Kong market or like in nearby that you liked?
I think all these companies and industries, they're growing steadily. I don't seem to see a strong spike, but there are more buzz around contactless technology, robotics, e-commerce, and how we connect all these supply chain. And when we say supply chain, the supply chain is actually covering a very wide spectrums. So e-commerce, you need logistics. Logistics, you need automations. And then you need robotics, you need predictions, AI. And then when it comes to e-commerce, you need payment as well. So fintech, payment gateways, and all these API actually interconnecting to each other, warehouse, so on and so forth. So the e-commerce is actually a driver to take up all these communities and all these industries all together. Just to pick our firm as an example, we also invested a few companies in this field during this difficult moment, particularly in e-commerce and also robotics delivery. So there's actually many interesting momentum going on. And apart from all these e-commerce, I would also suggest people to start paying attention to industries such as healthcare, biotech. Again, contactless technology is still huge and ways to further discover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely makes sense to focus on where people's attention is, what we're interested in and how can you help them. There's something like to you, Cherish, which I'm just thinking now. You mentioned before when we come to hackathons, it's this idea of also like one of the points is solving the problem that also like people might be facing or companies, and solving it for them. And I remember like in the past that you also started in, I think that was in Chandigarh, was it where? Like when you started like a business with some friends, you went basically to the city hall and said, which problems do you have? Which can we solve basically, and you built like a big solution for them. What is kind of like when we talk about startups, how can startups be more focused on creating solutions like from a growth hack for the customers so that maybe even like bigger customers like the city management faces?
Right. Great question, right? And kind of nobody asks this question anymore. Where is that, okay, you're solving an issue, but is your problem worth solving? Do you have the right problem to solve? Right? And everybody thinks that whatever you do in real life, just get it on an app. That's basically a business idea. In Bangalore, no matter what you can do, you'll have an app for that. If you want somebody to pick up stuff from like under your building, give it to you in your hand, there's an app for that, right? But but yeah, address is a bigger issue, right? Like what is it that the world really needs, and what is it that we're moving towards? What should we try and solve? There's no dearth of solving really challenging problems like Felix mentioned, right? There's e-commerce is moving, fintech is moving, especially when automations, the contactless technology is moving in. One of the biggest reasons one of the biggest philosophies that I propagate is that do not like find a problem that is being faced by you or maybe somebody like you, solve it for them, and then try and solve it for five more people like them. Do not think about scale. Do not think about whether this is disrupting or not. But what happens in that process is that you are solving something very tangible. When you pitch your idea to somebody, chances are in a boardroom, like people like you, Michael, who's going to connect these guys with investors, right? In that room, there will be a variety of people, and in that room, there will be one person who has faced this issue, right? One of the startups that I'm currently in I was engaging with, they're called Savo Labs, right? And they're solving single authentication without OTP. Now there's the OTP authentication is something that is being faced by everyone, right? And they landed on this technology just because probably they would try and fill in up an OTP, but the OTP came late, and they obviously got stuck in the payment gateway thing, and it was a never-ending, frustrating cycle. Um, how I did it was that I was felt in school. I didn't have my horizons broad enough to identify, hey, what to do, but I did the next best thing. I went to the person or to the community, to my government of my state, and said, you guys know about what challenges the city is facing. Furthermore, you can even forecast what challenges will come up, right? So since I can't figure out what to solve, why don't you tell me, right? Why don't you tell me what to solve, what to build for? Because you have the purview of the problems that are faced by a million people in the cities. You have the historical data to back up your statement that this is why we should solve this. These are how many complaints we receive, and we should solve this because these are the challenges that are forthcoming, right? So if you can't figure out the problems that are worth solving, go to people who will have access to this. Go to people who will have plethora of problems but have no solutions or engineers or product to solve this. It's important, right? And I can't. And thank you, Michael, actually for pointing this out. I like I said, doesn't get asked enough. It's very important to find the problem worth solving and find the right person who will give you that right problem. If you are not, like I wasn't aware enough, go to people who can give you those problems that you can then focus on.
I guess like if in overall, like let's say every city would organize kind of like school hackathons, solve the problems of your city. And then if you have a good idea, we fund your startup. Now that would be, I think, a very interesting model, if that would be happening all over the world. Sponsored by Cherry Santoshi. Why not? That could be something.
That does happen. Like in India, we have a lot of government hackathons that I kind of have taken care of. Um, as a matter of fact, if anybody from India is watching this, just comment in the chat window if you've ever used um, Beam UPI or NPCI payment gateways, right? So NPCI, which is National Payment Corporation of India, which is kind of these communities, this company kind of is capable of handling 3 million transactions every day, and that's what they do, right? And India being like a global market and like a huge scope with a lot of users, right? They have conducted a lot of hackathons for us because they have realized the potential of community solving challenges that they can't. And the community has realized solving problems that government is facing and the impact that they will try and carry by solving problems for them at that scale is going to be immense and something that you will not get, just by sitting in school or college or finding internships online.
Definitely makes sense. That's a good approach, like really going into that. And maybe going from kind of like finding the right problems, which is a question from the audience, maybe for you, Felix. Do you have a role model company? So let's say somebody who is already doing great at identifying problems, growth hacking, making sure to really scale and develop. Who is a good example? Can be also a local company. You just need to explain what we do.
Wow, this is a really challenging question. It's really hard to pick. I have a few in my head, but most recently, definitely Notion. I'm particularly paying more attention to Notion because a couple of things. First of all, great product, lean team, and they managed to focus on one thing to help people solve their own problems. And I think they are doing a particularly good job than many other alternatives out there. People often compare them with products like Airtable, Trello, some legacies such as Evernote or even Bear or Coder. But what makes Notion special in this space is they allows a lot of flexibility from the user's perspective. Users are extremely willing to give their feedback. People are extremely willing to participate their journey of building new features, the journeys of setting up communities. I don't seem to see any similar companies out there who manage to bring up this momentum. And for me as a Notion user, I feel so proud every time when they manage to respond really fast, launch new features really fast, and also curating communities for different neighborhoods, localize their content. So you see more and more people engaging the ecosystem within the Notion users.
Do you know like how Notion grew kind of like from Workofx? I would usually say, I guess, like how do you get your first 1,000 users and then how to get the first 1,000,000 users? Like what do you know like some of the strategies that Notion applied here?
I don't have any research with myself, but what I learned from a couple of stories I read, particularly the founders interview of Notion, is they actually started a company as originally as a web builder, like another Wix, another Squarespace or workflow. But they managed to pivot really quick because they realized there are more demands of people looking for customized and personalized productivity solutions. And that's how they come in place to provide these answers for people. And now people are using Notion to build websites. So they're actually circling back to all these features, feedback, and platform kind of loop where people now has the flexibilities and willingness to use different features to build their own thing, to display the ultimate features where Notions can really power their thinking. I believe this is something super hard to replicate. I do see a lot of upcoming companies learn from the Notion success stories are trying to create another Notions, but don't seem to see any strong emergence right now. I think they're definitely worth your time to pay attention how they grow. You don't have to be a user, but it's really joyful to read their success stories and how they manage to grow their communities, build their products, and access the different nations.
I guess it's like, don't try to follow to be the next so-and-so or copy the so-and-so, but rather try to solve the problems where you try to solve, or use the same methodology when it comes to solving issues. I think that might be the better approach to like growth and build up. There's another question then to you, Cherish, directly. It said, is it good to work on Me Too concept if you find a gap? If I get this correctly, you can correct me here, admin, like if I get it correct. If I get this right, I assume it's kind of like, does it make sense to add like a Me Too concept kind of for growth also, if you think it fits whatever you're building?
I'm not sure what does this question mean. Does this mean that Me Too, does it mean the Me Too movement, or does Me Too here mean that I also felt this problem?
I think there should be the movement, because the hashtag, it's the hashtag. Admin, you can add something. It should be the movement itself. I guess it's kind of like, maybe to rephrase then this question to make it more sensible. I guess the idea is, how much sense does it make to also use, let's call it like the current social trends, so you like jump onto it. I don't want to say be in a negative way, but just like be part of like new trends, or when like social change is happening, to add this to grow your business.
Oh, it's about business, they say.
It's about business. Maybe admin, maybe you want to just unmute yourself for a second, explain that. I'm not sure. No, I think he's not connected to the microphone. But yeah, when Cherish, just like what you think maybe to add on that.
Right. So I think they mentioned it's about business, so it's not about the concept, is what I see from it. And what I think they kind of referring to the point where I mentioned that solve it for one person, and when the second person says that, hey, I also felt that, that problem applies to me too, right? And that's what they're referring to. Definitely makes sense. If that is your product, if that's your strategy, how to solve issues and how to find a gap, right? So they mentioned, is it good to work on a Me Too concept if you find gap? So let me phrase this better, and admin, if I'm right, just say yes here. What you're referring is to, there is a gap in the market, there's a problem to be solved, and somebody says that, hey, I felt this, and another person says, hey, I felt it too, right? And that creates a synergy and kind of validates the problem to be solved, right? And that's what we're getting to. All right. So assuming this is the problem, that's definitely the strategy to go to.
I guess you can add like some more points. We can pick it up later if like there's something to be added from his side. And then we can definitely go into that. When we're talking about like trends or differences, Felix, like somebody asked, you studied in the UK for some time, if I remember that was correct. And they said like, are there any differences in growth strategies between Europe and Asia?
Thanks for bringing this up. Thanks for reading my bio. First of all, short answer. I only started my entrepreneurial journey when I come back to Asia. So I don't have any startups and entrepreneurial experience when I was in Europe. But however, when I was working for the companies, I do have more experience looking into different landscapes, and particularly in growth in Asia, in Oceania, and also in Europe, also the States. Very different because in Asia, although many communities are very ripened, many growth, really strong leaderships, but still we are kind of following what people created from the West. There's not much influences right here in this part of the regions who really initiate new frameworks, new mindsets, and new ways of growing companies. But I think we are moving into an emerging directions where these influences and express and more sharing, resources and integrating each other. So I think we are right now in the position to integrating our resources, more engagement and more collaborations. So if you want me to distinguish the difference, I would say many mindsets are still really driven by the West. And then right now we're still as a follower to adopting these methodologies, localize them and apply to our own companies and ecosystem.
Would you see maybe even differences maybe for both of you, like between, let's say, I would call like the wider Chinese market, like with Hong Kong kind of included, and like the Indian market as like the two biggest and the ones that's emerging. Like at some point, I think China already overtook the US. I'm not sure anymore. And India likely also in the near future. And that will be the focus, shifting everything to Asia. Would you two like see the differences when it comes to growth between like India and China? When it comes to strategies as a business where people need to know when we interact with these markets. Maybe Cherish, you want to say like something specific that you can also be like what you see, what's specific about India when it comes to growth hacking, and then maybe like Felix, what's maybe for China, it's different. What's important to know as a business, either with the people to keep in mind or with development.
Got it. So I'm not sure about the Chinese ecosystem as I haven't explored that much. I think Felix can maybe add there. About disruption in India, it's going to be. I see a lot of startups coming up in India, especially in times like these, where they have identified that there are a lot of systems which were working were broken. India, in itself, has always lacked digitization of data. Now, when I was working with the government, right, like one of the biggest challenge that I had to even create a product was to create data that is digitized, right? So disruption and in fact growth in India, there are two ways you can do this. If you're somebody who's targeting tier one, tier two cities, it's fairly easy to do so. Then your challenges are basically about getting users, getting adoptions, increasing user base, and then slowly and steadily kind of building upon retaining people and giving the service, impacting your operations, and then growing, right? However, that's not the majority of the India. The majority of India is also in tier two and tier three cities, which will not have a lot of data which is digitized. And if you don't have data which is digitized, you cannot disrupt or grow it in terms of technical products. So your challenges become, it's not from zero, it's from minus. You go long back, you find a way that you kind of find a way to migrate things from legacy systems to what is currently available. You build systems which are now going to only take data in a digitized form, and then work your way around it. So disruption in India, it's going to the growth in India is basically dependent upon how well can you kind of handle data in itself. How well can you because there are a lot of people, right? And a lot of people will have a lot of multiple data points as well. So the ability of handling data will kind of determine how well you grow in a community that huge. So I definitely see a lot of potential here with startups which are going to have a huge data science team, can grow businesses in terms of analyzing what to build and how to build by just recording and analyzing data in a more sensible manner. About I think the Chinese ecosystem, maybe Felix can add.
Yeah, that's a good point about digitalizing data. I think we also facing a very similar problems in these regions. But what I want to highlight is people in my regions, extremely like over celebrating and over embracing those successful cases, and over celebrating all the bright side of all these tech giants, which means there's not much creativity from budding entrepreneurs. They're following how all these people success, how all these people create their own journeys, but not much really putting resources in their own knowledge developments, putting resources into how they learn and connecting people. I think there's a lot more to do for us as a community builder to educate people, to provide the right resources and help people go through the journey step by step. Circle back to growth, same concept. Many people still borrowing all these successful cases and frameworks created by people who have been well developed in the West and bringing back without the appropriate localization. So that's why many methodologies are actually not working, not because the methodology doesn't work, but because how they localize and how they manage to adopt these frameworks into their companies and customers.
Definitely makes sense. Kind of adapting to the local market. That's like can be challenging. I think it goes back to what you said before. Like a lot of stuff that maybe is taken from the West, but it becomes like a local flavor. But on the same time, people from outside try to enter the markets, but then don't understand why their strategies, which I thought everything is working on, doesn't work well. Interesting, definitely. Let's go to another question. This from Shia. How important has pricing of freemium become as a growth hack during pandemic? Maybe I think Felix, I assume maybe you have like some idea on that. I can assume that maybe or maybe also if Cherish, if something in India was on that, but has like pricing of freemium become a growth hack or not really?
I will put it in this way. I will divide your questions into two parts. Maybe a first concept in terms of pricing, premium, early bird, waiting list. I think all these, strategies considering as a single cluster. There's never a right time and never a right moment to make use of which pricing strategies, not because of whether there's a pandemic or not, but how your customers want to engage your services is the key. Whether they are a group of people who already educated how to monetize and value the service and product you provide. And I think there's no right or wrong, like pricing at freemium or premium. But what we realize is more and more companies are trying to monetize as early as possible, because there's so many services and products trying to offer freemium, but doesn't really providing the true values of how the users can actually solve the problems by using the softwares. And by charging premium early on, so you're giving your users more confidence you're providing legit solutions and high quality services. So I think what you need to do is really measures whether you have the resources and also the capability to monetize your product early on. Speaking of growth hacking during difficult times, no one can predict pandemic, and no one can predict recessions. And honestly speaking, many great companies and many great unicorns we see nowadays are actually founded during difficult time, like financial recession, financial crisis. Uber, Airbnb, they founded exactly the time during financial recessions. Now during the pandemic, this year, surprisingly, there's way more unicorns than last year. Look at Hopin, look at Airbnb, they're going to file their IPO. Look at Robinhood, look at many different fintechs are joining the unicorn club. So there's never a right time. It just matters whether you manage to catch the wave, even though during this difficult moment. And you can only do this when you are well prepared, even though you have difficult situations or not.
I think it also gives like a bit of hope. As you said, a lot of companies, if unicorns were started during times of crisis, DueDash was started during COVID. So let's see how we are in 10 years. But I mean, it's good. It's good to go. And definitely, as you said, now, like even if it's crisis, you can still make the best out of it. And with freemium, I can definitely agree. You have to see if it works for you or not. It can be quite expensive, and you have to provide enough value that people say it makes sense to come. And then even go with like the paid services. There's a question to you, Cherish. I'm not sure if I get it 100%. It says like, what is important in aggregation model customers, vendor partners? I'm not 100% sure about this one. Do you understand? If not, like, I guess we will ask admin first to clarify here.
Yeah, I think we can ask.
Yeah, I think you need to clarify. I think that's not 100% clear. And maybe add a bit more detail. What do you mean in aggregation? Like what the question here is on that part. Then let's go to another one. So AI is from Xiam. AI is a huge market, which is like a good strategy to focus on various industries verticals at the moment. So does it make sense to focus on like different verticals, on different problems, or with one problem at a time and then go to the next one? Like from your development experience, how do people go at it? They work on different problems at the same time or just focus on the one?
Yeah, a slightly more nuanced question, right? So I mean, first of all, let's not look at AI as something which is mandatory to have in a product. It's not something that you need to have to build successful products. Like, and Felix, correct me if I'm wrong, Notion doesn't have like an AI feature right now, and they're doing fairly well, right? Yeah.
I don't know. I think AI is pretty common nowadays, and many software technology solutions are powered by some sort of AI decision makings. I believe they do have these mechanisms to help us modify and further develop their features. But as a users, we don't have a direct access to all these benefits from artificial intelligence.
Right. No, I think that's what I was probably trying to say. Thanks for putting it out there, right? To what level do you imbibe AI in a product is secondary, or is not like the only parameter to the growth of your business? When it comes to solving a problem, right? I think you should try and stick to one problem rather than kind of pick up multiple verticals and then try and solve it using technology. At the end of the day, what makes you or your product successful or your company successful is basically how well you solve that problem. With or without AI, doesn't matter. uh, Now I understand where you're coming from also, right? Because if you're solving for India, you have a lot of data, and if you have a lot of data, you probably want to inject AI there. But here is what I've noticed, right? In all of our hackathons, a lot of people use machine learning and AI when they pitch it to their jury. Now, a lot of times the jury will ask that, hey, can it work maybe with 90% efficiency without the AI, right? And more often than not, right? Sometimes it's not, but the more often than not, the answer is yes. With it could probably work with have the same features, work with the similar industry, same target audience, and work effectively, without AI as well. And that contributes to 80 to 90% of the times. Now, the question from the jury back to the teams are that when you add AI, right, you're just increasing the complexity of the product. And while that is important to do so, I think it's important that you reach a stage where you have to do it rather than focusing and harping on the product, harping on the technology right from the beginning, and then narrowing your scope and try and inject the technology just for the sake of it. I think you should try and solve a problem in the best way possible. And technology, whether or not without AI, that's something that is, that you can leave up to the technology, your engineering or your product team.
Yeah, totally echo that. I think just to build on top, speaking of AI, artificial intelligence has been existing in the market for more than 40 years. But why in the near economies, more and more people talking about AI, machine learning, or even deep learning, is because more data are being accessible, more companies are welcoming these technologies to be making their operation more efficient. But honestly, from a customer point of view, we don't care about what technology you use. We care about how you solve our problems. We look at companies like Uber, Gojek, Grab, Airbnb, these big guys. Of course, they use a lot of artificial intelligence to predict the future, measure the data. But when I open my cell phone, call a cab, I don't care about whether there's AI. I care about whether the car arrives on time. That's the only thing I care about. Of course, there's AI to make this happen. But when you pitching your customers, pitching investors, and getting partners on board, AI is not might be relevant, might be important, but not the only thing you should consider. You should also pay more attention to how you solve the problems, how fast you can get into the market.
Maybe like one last question we have here. Can also be for both of you. What are the biggest challenges when companies want to grow and expand abroad? When we want to have like a growth strategy going outside of my home country, what did you guys see or maybe experience yourself? Yeah, Cherish, you have a global community, so I guess like you faced a couple of challenges here.
I believe so. And Michael, I would really, hope that you could also, add your points here, because you're also trying kind of grow your community outside Germany here. But you're right, right? One of the biggest ways to increase your revenue, especially if you're a startup from India, is to either sell to the rural India, which consists of tier 2, T3 cities, which consist of maybe 50% and more than customers, or sell it abroad, US or like European countries, which have deeper pockets. Now, when you kind of go there, you'll obviously not move with the team because you'd kind of conserve the burn that you'd cost kind of causing. So the growth strategies here, it's very market dependent. It's very technology dependent because I remember when Amazon was trying to break into China, right? China has their own laws, really. So no matter how significant of a company or how huge of a weight or how great your product is, it kind of at the end of the day it depends what you can play with, what you have available in the market, how crowded is the marketplace. Like digital advertising, for that matter, if you're a product, if you're a company which is trying to grow abroad, you'll obviously pick countries which have deeper pockets and the potential. I think some things to keep in mind when you try and grow abroad is, first of all, identify how easy it is to do business in that market, especially with the company and the structure that you have. The second thing to do is what is your TAM, what is your total addressable market, if you choose to move there right to, as soon as you can. The third is consider your market cap and see if you even reach an X percentage of that, will you be able to sustain before you even make that jump? Because once you enter a market in abroad, your burn will go insane, like increasingly high. And if you give up that race midway, or almost when you reach that goal and you realize it wasn't worth it, you kind of need to do that cost benefit analysis right there and then, before you even jump there. That's something that I would add. I would give it back to Felix and Michael, you to tell me what your experience are.
Sure. Felix, maybe you go first.
Yeah, I think in terms of expansion and growth, I usually follow two concepts. First of all, geographic expansions. So there's a couple of signals you can consider when your company is ready to scale to from one to other geographic location, is whether you have the enough traffic of users who come from regions outside of yourself. If there's significant amounts of people, customers coming to you who are not in your own neighborhood, maybe it's a good sign to expand. But when you expand, you really need to first consider whether you have the domain knowledge of that neighborhood, whether you have the access of network expertise before you actually set up the team and have people to localize your product, your sales approach, and manage to get things done. Second concept of expansion is the adjacent product. So when your users are demanding new features or maybe some unexpected requests where you sort of realize, okay, maybe there's something you can consider, but it's kind of contradict or stay too far from your core values and also your product and service, then you might want to develop something new. But it's very hard to justify whether it's worth your resources and investment, only if you have some early adopters to buy in this concept and give you a fair amount of resources to develop this. I would suggest you have a look at a book called Design to Grow. It's written by the former head of designer of Coca-Cola, David Butler. So this book is talk about one concept only, although they have almost 300 pages. How you standardize your operation. That's it. And you can see Coca-Cola, they're localizing is from avatars all the way to islands to urban cities. They use a lot of localization, standardization approach to create different marketing messages, create new flavor in your own neighborhood, create new brands and other extended licensed products. The other good example is McDonald's. I hate to mention these two companies, but they are definitely doing some good jobs and manage to scale and expand their brands and operations. That's towards the brand side. There's one influencer I follow a lot who talk about this expansion and adjacent product methodologies, which is Brian Bayford from the founders of Reforge, also a growth hacking godfather in this ecosystem. So definitely check out these resources and brands and see what you can borrow and then apply into your own company.
Yeah, I think maybe to add some last points, definitely interesting what you guys said. Maybe two things. On the one hand, I think with like the digital space and how the world is evolving, I would say there's a certain, it's called global niches or global kind of groups of people. When I was studying, for example, in China or when I was in India, Where people, I was felt a lot closer and more understanding with some people who are living in this same city, or like my hometown in Germany, and who you would think we have more in common, which is not actually the case. So we have like these kind of building of like global social groups where a lot of things are in common. And when you kind of expand, I think globally, kind of understanding really that you pick the right people, that can really help you in that growth abroad. But of course, it's challenging. I think like the biggest challenge I see usually with people when they try interculturally, like it's a business or anything else, is the understanding part. Because in the end, it comes down that you understand how that market functions, how the people work, what is the framework, the procedure, how do you need to sell, and then kind of execute. And even the execution, it's something like to know how to properly do it. And usually people as a framework use what they know in their home country, and it might not necessarily apply for the other one, or we don't know how to twitch it. So I would usually say, I think the most important part is kind of like doing your research, understanding the people, the market, the culture. Ideally, if you don't understand yourself enough, or even if you do, get somebody local. If I would expand even to India or China, I would still get people locally. I wouldn't claim that I have enough knowledge to know everything about that market. Even if I would be living, let's say, I would have been lived 10 years or in China or India, even then it might still be good to have like local support because it takes a lot of time. And then on top of that, you might need to go into a specific industry or place. I could be a German businessman and I'm all about real estate, all about real estate. Doesn't mean I can help you with building your health tech startup in Germany. I know nothing about that. It's like just as an example here of that, right? So that's kind of like where people always need to do their research. I think that's important when it comes to market action. Well, I think we've come to the end of the session. I want to thank both of you for the time, providing your insights and your experience. If you want to learn more about them, connect with them, if it's about a hackathon, growing your community or anything else, you can find them on DueDash, where I just chat them up. I think we're happy to answer your question, and then maybe something can done be through that. So check them out, what they do, also their communities of Angel Hub for Felix and also Hacker for Cherish. And otherwise, again, thank you for your time, you two, and then looking forward for our next events. And if you want to join here in the audience, you'll find them on DueDash, and we look forward to that.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great. Then see you guys soon.